Welcome to episode 14 of the Carnism Debunked podcast. Today I'm joined by Danny Ishay. You may know him as YouTuber Lifting Vegan Logic. Danny's videos help refute the ethical and nutritional arguments against veganism and plant-based diets, and he loves to respond to the notable anti-vegan YouTubers and Instagrammers to call them out on their nonsense. He's also a passionate gym goer in his spare time, so it's great to have him on the show today because we're going to refute some of the myths out there that plague society about building muscle as a vegan, among other stuff. So, Danny, thanks for coming on to the show.
Yeah, thank you, George, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, good to finally talk face to face as well. This is good. So I wanted to just ask you, because it's obviously noticeable from your channel that bodybuilding is a passion of yours, even though your content is mainly built around the ethical side of stuff. So, but how long have you been sort of bodybuilding and hitting the gym, so to speak?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because technically I've started lifting weights in like 8th grade when I was like 13 or so. But I didn't get relatively serious with it until I can say maybe around like age 15 or 16. So around like 10th to 11th grade. And this is a time when I was not vegan. I was eating plenty of turkey sandwiches and all these kinds of things. Into the whole like bro science stuff. Not too scientific in my training, just more like, hormonal
which you now
teenager.
debunk in a twist of irony. You now like to debunk the bro science. So you've gone from the bro scientist to the bro science debunker.
Right. Yeah. I mean, going from age 15 to 25, I would hope that I gain some amount of wisdom such that I'm no longer a bro scientist, right?
Absolutely. And so you've been, and how old are you now?
I turned 25 last March.
Yeah. So you've been lifting sort of since your teens sort of kind of thing, and now you're still going strong now. And how long have you been vegan?
I actually recently hit 7 years 7 days ago. Yeah. So it's been 7.
Because it's noticeable you've built an impressive physique while you're vegan, which is great. You represent that well, which is good for debunking the myths. But then what do you say to people? Because I always see this said to guys who are strong or who have good physique, or like I heard it said to Patrick Baboumian on UK TV recently. He was disproving the standard anti-vegan journos like Piers Morgan and stuff, and Piers and the like. They'll say to him, and they'll say to people like you, "Oh, but Danny, you built that physique while you were eating meat. So this is nonsense that you're saying you can get this as a vegan." How do you get that question, and how do you sort of deal with that?
Oh, of course I do. And I actually have a very lucky scenario to which I'm almost an outlier and can actually fuck this question up very easily. So I actually was diagnosed with Crohn's disease before I was vegan.
Yeah.
Or at least I experienced the symptoms of it. I wasn't diagnosed till I was vegan, but I for sure had it prior. And around 2 years into being vegan is when it flared up a bunch. I was going through a very stressful time, and stress can be a catalyst for Crohn's flare-ups. And I lost essentially all of my muscle. I went from 185 pounds to, I believe, 150. I have a whole video on this. And I looked, I'm Jewish, so I could say this. I looked straight out of like Auschwitz almost. Like I lost everything. And then as a vegan, I gained it all back and more. So this kind of criticism actually can't be made toward me because I went through with losing everything that you can say I, quote, gained on a animal-based diet, and then I gained it all back solely on a vegan diet. So I'm actually exempt from this criticism, which is very nice. But even if I wasn't, I would still say that when I was a vegan before the Crohn's attack, a year and a half into being vegan before everything came, I had the strongest lifts I've ever had while being vegan, which is to say that although I, quote, gained all that muscle while not being vegan, I gained extra strength while being vegan. So if logically it would follow that if I can't possibly gain this as a vegan, that I can also get stronger as a vegan, and I very much did. So those are the two kind of responses, but the main one I'm going to give is the Crohn's one because it completely defeats any question of,
But how then do you deal with, I mean, do you personally think that it is more convenient to eat animal flesh for things like amino acid profile and stuff like that? Because this is something I've even heard maybe vegan bodybuilders sometimes say. They might say, look, yeah, no, the stuff about we can't build muscle as vegans is a load of bullshit. Oh, I would say eating meat is more convenient, but you can absolutely make it work as a vegan. What's your take on that?
I think anytime you add a limitation to a diet, it's going to inherently be less convenient. Like you can also
Mm-hmm.
say it'd be more convenient to be a cannibal because you'd have more
Mm,
options as well.
yeah.
But with respect to animal protein versus plant protein, do I think that having access to meat as opposed to just plant-based foods is a convenience? Scientifically, no. There's plenty of we could say plant protein types of foods like soy and like in the form of tempeh and tofu that are very rich with amino acids and aren't those kinds of foods that are more so where that has all the aminos but it's in like varying proportions, you know. So
Yeah.
there's that as well. So I wouldn't say that that's true. There's plenty of ways to get enough protein on it, and the amount of ways isn't so little that it's like, oh, it's kind of inconvenient, I'd rather be able to eat meat. There's
Yeah.
plenty. Like the tofu tempeh seitan is like the chicken turkey uh beef of like animal based foods. It's like the same thing in terms of like you
Yeah.
just have those little meats and you move on. So
Well, what people don't realize is that plants actually have a full amino acid profile, at least with the
mhm.
regards to the dietary amino acids.
Yeah.
I think I saw it on a Gregor vid a while back. He was sort of saying that I think he mentioned that the idea that you have to combine proteins or something as a vegan actually came from like an edition of Vogue magazine from the 50s or
Yeah.
something like that. And the
Yeah.
studies they took on rats or something like that. This is
hmm
how crazy the propaganda has got against sort of muscle building as a vegan, right?
hmm Yeah. Yeah. I believe that was a Vogue magazine from the 70s, and yeah, it's complete nonsense. If you go on Chronometer and just look up any plant food, even an orange, you'll see every essential amino acid there.
Yeah.
Uh, Possibly like in varying proportions, but it ultimately doesn't matter. People will bring up sometimes leucine as like an amino acid uh, that maybe vegans need to supplement, but
Yes.
there is a threshold that anyone who's eating a varied plant-based diet will hit, assuming that varied plant-based diet includes a general higher amount of protein. So if somebody's eating like, you know, let's say they have a full day of eating and they have like, you know, rice and beans and then like pasta with tempeh and like all these kinds of things and maybe a scoop of protein powder that's pea protein isolate or soy protein isolate, you're gonna
Mm,
pass that leucine threshold regardless. Um,
yeah.
so there's not even an extra need for vegans to be particular about leucine. So long as you're consuming around zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight from plants, you're essentially at the same advantage. And there's even studies on
Mm,
this where they'll compare um, plant protein to animal protein in terms of resistance training
yeah.
and people's individual responses to said resistance training. And there's no statistically significant difference whatsoever in the results. And they end up concluding that like, yeah, it doesn't really matter as long
Now
so
that
so long as you have the same protein.
Yes, that's the
Mhm.
thing. Eat enough protein and you'll just get enough amino acids by default. It's not really something you need to like monitor or think about, right? But
Right.
the thing you mentioned about zero point 0.8 grams protein per pound of body weight, is that something you're just recommending for the average vegan, or are you just talking about that with regards to if you're lifting actively, and if so, how actively?
Oh, only if you're lifting and your goal is to gain muscle and strength, or at least maximize the degree to which you gain muscle and strength from lifting.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
how important is stuff like calories with regards to gaining muscle? Because a lot of people are focused on protein and stuff. Do you
Mhm.
place an importance on amount of calories as well that you eat if you want to gain muscle?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's three states in which you can gain muscle without eating in a calorie surplus. And to the
Mm,
people listening, a calorie surplus is essentially when you eat above your maintenance calories. And your maintenance
yeah.
calories is the amount of calories you'd have to eat to neither gain or lose any weight. So
Hmm.
There's three kinds of people who can get away with essentially not caring about calories. The first is going to be a beginner who's so new to lifting that the muscle stimulus is so new that you're just going to gain muscle regardless. Your body's like, whoa, what is this? Like we need
Yeah.
to rebuild, you know. The
There's
second
that
is
inflammation you get, isn't there, when you start out lifting as well? Your muscles sort of get inflamed, so there's that your body's
right.
response to that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just such a new thing. It's like your
Yes.
body's gonna adapt straightforwardly. The
Yeah.
second population is people that have not lifted in a while, but they have muscle memory on their side. So
Hmm.
they used to be jacked and then they stopped for like a couple of years. They can
Mm.
actually just go into it solely caring about protein and lifting, and they'll get a significant amount of their muscle back. And then the third is
Mm.
people taking drugs. So if you're not in these three categories, which most people aren't, especially people who are no longer beginners and haven't fallen off, um, you should care about calories. It's very difficult to eat, for example, in a deficit when you're outside of these
Yeah.
three groups and gain muscle because you are literally expending more energy on a daily basis than you are absorbing,
Yeah.
right? So now there's studies on now what threshold of a surplus do we need to maximize muscle gain? And there's a paper, I forgot what it was called, but essentially they had two groups. One group had like I think it was a 200 calorie surplus, meaning let's say their maintenance was 2,500, they were eating 2,700 per day. So it's
Yeah.
about 200 calories of energy excess per day. And then the other group was about, I think, 600. So they were trying to see if there was varying degrees of muscle gain between these two groups. And the only thing that was different between the two in terms of gain was fat gain, while the
Yeah.
muscle gain was the same. So what you gather from the study is that, you know, you probably don't need to go above 200 calories in your surplus to maximize muscle gain, right? So that's,
Okay.
yeah.
And how, but we do need to have some kind of surplus of calories, right? Now, how do we do that as vegans is the question a lot of people are going to ask because, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's plant-based diets tend to be lower in calories than animal-based diets. In fact, a lot lower in calories, right?
Yeah.
How do we do that? What would be your hack, so to speak, for that?
Yeah, to start, I would go with liquid calories because
Hmm.
they tend to be less satiating, making you able to consume more.
Hmm.
So, an example, you can say take like 2 cups of soy milk. That's about we can say that's 14 grams of protein. Add
Yeah.
a scoop of protein in there. That's another 25 grams, and
Mm.
then add 4 tablespoons of peanut butter. That's an additional 14 grams of protein,
That's a
and then
thick protein shake, bro, with two C's right there.
it
That
it's
you've
very
got.
it's very thick, and you don't, to be clear, you don't have to do this, but this is something
Yeah.
that
Okay.
it's like a weight gainer shake almost, right? And
Yeah.
you'll be
Yeah.
getting like 70 to 80 grams of protein in one serving,
Damn.
or not one serving, but one meal.
Yeah.
There's also just prioritizing calorie dense plant-based foods because yes, as you say, on average, we could say a plant food is less in calories than an animal food, but there's still plenty of outliers
Hmm.
in the plant-based food kingdom, we can call it, that are high in calories, like nuts, seeds, things like peanut butter.
Mm.
Pastas could be dense, rice could be dense, tofu can be relatively dense. So there's many ways in which you can go about this. You just have to target the higher calorie plant foods, and you know, don't oversaturate your meals with things like loads of broccoli and loads of super high volume, low calorie foods.
Okay,
Mhm.
but now what about cooking oils and stuff? Is that too simplistic? So say I smother my fucking dinner in vegetable oil, olive oil, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Is that is that helping or is that bad?
No, it could help in regards to getting you to a surplus because I mean a tablespoon of oil is about 120 calories.
Right.
So think about that volume to calorie ratio. It's like it's very
Mm.
easy. I wouldn't. I was convinced for a while that oils are detrimental, but after seeing much stronger evidence, I'm not so much of the belief unless we're talking about things like coconut oil and
Mm.
palm oil, given the saturated fat content. inside.
Oh, controversial. So this is so
Yeah,
next debate is Esselstyn versus Danny
yeah,
about the
yeah,
oil. So you're
yeah.
not convinced then maybe that oils they damage the lining of the heart and stuff like that? Would you say they at least do if you overconsume them or anything like that?
From what I've seen, the evidence supporting that was just very weak. I know
Mm,
they talked about like postprandial issues. I forgot what the term was, but essentially looking at the artery wall um, right after consuming oil, and
yeah,
essentially the outcome they detected was an outcome that you can actually detect in somebody just while sleeping or working out. So unless they're going to conclude that those things are also unhealthy, they shouldn't.
yeah,
And the idea is that we need to look at things long term, not like just right after you consume something. And in long term
yeah.
outcomes, things like olive oil and extra virgin olive oil have actually been associated with a lower risk of mortality. So, but we can get
Can
into all
I?
that later for sure if you want.
Yeah, well, I want to actually come up with a little rebuttal for that now. Now,
Sure.
I thought that these oil companies, like olive oil companies, thought, or maybe still do think that that's a little marketing trick they've used because it's like, yes, it helps lower cholesterol and lower your risk of this. But I think that's because these are done on studies with people who replace animal fats with olive oil, which obviously has no cholesterol in it. So, of course, it's better
Hmm.
for your heart to replace fucking bacon grease with olive oil, but that doesn't necessarily make it better than an oil-free diet for your heart, surely.
Yeah. So what we would need there is a paper that adjusted for that,
Mm-hmm.
for people that aren't replacing, and see
Yeah.
if we have the same outcome. And I believe those papers do exist.
Mm.
I would highly recommend looking into Nutrition Science Made Simple on YouTube. He's a very terrific science communicator, very
Yeah.
objective. He's made me rethink a lot of the myths that I've seen propagated throughout the plant-based health community for the last decade.
Mm.
He has no agenda whatsoever. He's not paid by anybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would just recommend everybody go check him out because he's the one who's essentially brought this to light for me. But
Okay. Well,
yeah, hmm,
here's one for you then, Danny.
sure.
Why? How are vegans getting fat then? How are we getting fat if we not? I'm not a fat shamer, by the way. I'm not saying this is any kind of. I'm not saying oh, but bad
Hmm.
for being fat, blah blah. But I'm
Hmm.
saying vegans can be fat. It just happens, just like
Yeah.
non-vegans. So how are we managing to do that if oil is so great? And because we're okay, let's say I eat a vegetable curry and it's mainly low fat stuff. I've got chickpeas on the plate, I've got onions, I've got
Hmm.
rice and stuff, but it's smothered in vegetable oil. Surely that's like the quote unquote bad part of the meal. But now you're saying, well, that might not kind of be the case. The oil might not be so bad. So how is it that we're getting fat and stuff in this day and age as
Yeah.
vegans?
So getting fat is as simple as being in an energy surplus or a calorie surplus. So without a doubt, oil can facilitate that process given how high in calories it is relative to the volume.
Okay.
But just because a food item though can make you fat
Mm,
doesn't mean that that food item is bad. Like so oil could be something that makes other foods hyper palatable. You're more susceptible to overeating because they taste really good, but that doesn't mean that, you know, having olive oil in a population of people who are consistently eating at maintenance calories or even a deficit are going to be fat, right? Because they're by
mm,
definition not in an energy surplus, right? But
yeah.
your question about like why are vegans getting fat? That's really as simple as vegans still being able to eat in a calorie surplus. It has nothing really to do with oil or anything like that. The fact is that there's things like vegan ice cream, vegan chips, vegan donuts, and all these kinds of things,
Mm,
and they're very calorie dense. They're high in refined sugar. They're high in oil. Refined sugar and oil are essentially the least voluminous but highest calorie foods out there. So if you have something like
yeah.
a donut, it's like a donut is filled with oil and refined sugar. And if you look at like what a donut looks like in terms of its volume, it's like maybe 300 to 350 calories, but it's like
Yeah.
nothing. Like
And there's
it's
no
like
real nutrition in there. You're just eating sugar and oil, basically.
essentially, right? And it's less
Yeah.
satiating because there's not a hell of a lot of fiber. So you're able to also down a significant amount of these donuts. And before you know it, you're in a calorie surplus before the day even started. And yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This might be a stupid example, but just going back to the whole heart effects thing. Um, One thing, did you ever used to eat pig flesh bacon back in the day before you were vegan?
No, only because I was raised Jewish, so like it wasn't really
Yeah,
kosher.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because what I noticed whenever I would cook it is that when you wash the fat down this is disgusting to even think I used to do this now, but when you
hmm
wash the fucking pig fat down the pan after
hmm
that, once you've cooked it, you have to follow it with like boiling water and it all clogs up the pan. It's all white and it can clog up your sink if you
hmm
don't pour boiling water down your sink when you're washing up the pan. You don't
hmm
have to do that with like vegetable oil. So sure,
Yeah.
if you're thinking about the arteries in your heart,
hmm
that is that a silly example? I don't know.
I'd have to know more about like the actual like pathophysiology of like how plaque is built and all that to really know
Yeah.
if like that's like a reason to think why oil doesn't do what say uh the saturated fat in pigs
Yeah.
does. I'm not, so I can't really answer that confidently, but I mean maybe it sounds at face value it sounds like you could be onto something, or you're
Mm,
not. Who knows, right?
yeah. How many times are you hitting the gym a week at the moment?
Right now I hit it one, two, around 4 times. I used to go to the gym like 6 to 7 days a week. I'm not
Damn.
nearly as serious with the gym
Yeah.
as I used to be. Much more focused on like YouTube and content.
Yeah.
Um, there becomes a point in lifting as a natural where, in order for me to make significant gains, I have to like try extremely, extremely hard. I'm like almost, I don't want to say I'm like at my natural limit because I don't believe I am. I could probably get bigger, but essentially the effort to reward ratio just isn't like
Mm,
I don't care as much. So at the moment, I lift for health reasons, for aesthetic reasons for myself, and for like we could say animal rights reasons to like provide an example of like somebody who can have muscle and be vegan, because we all know the myths are everywhere with that.
yeah.
Um, but I'm not out here like as I used to be, where I'm like tracking every single thing and I'm training 6 days a week and making sure I get my sleep and all this stuff. Like that was more so me early college, late high school. And now I find that I'm just more focused on other things and growing, I guess, mentally as opposed to physically.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we've
hmm
got animals to liberate, haven't we? So I guess,
There we go. hmm
have you had any like injury setbacks during your training?
Uh, well, in high school, I was, and a lot of people do this, they start deadlifting and squatting
Mm,
like absolute morons and with very shit form. And I was definitely one of those people.
right.
And when you're so young, you're almost so like able to be active and like injury free that like you can't really see the short term effects of destroying your lower back with like
Yeah.
really bad form on the deadlift or the squat. So I've had a couple snaps in my lower back. I never got like x-rays done or anything, but um yeah, points where I would have to stop squatting for like 3 or 4 months, and I keep going with it, and it's definitely caused some long-term back pain. And to be
Damn.
clear, this happened before I was vegan, so for the anti-vegans listening, you can shut up. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, so but I'm not gonna pull like a John Venus, and just try eating eggs to solve my back
Oh
problem,
God.
right? So it's
Right. Well, this is what I wanted to talk about is this whole idea of injuries and like certain foods that heal them. Because what I'm hearing from the quote unquote ex-vegan crowd and the carnivore crowd is, oh, veganism won't help you heal your injuries. This will just give you setbacks, and you need to eat fresh caught salmon and eggs and drink raw milk and stuff, and then your injuries will improve. And you just can't do this as a vegan. Like, how do you
Mhm.
deal with that argument?
Yeah, well, it's definitely. I don't know what it means to say like this diet is going to heal your injuries versus this one won't.
Mm,
Injuries being healed is normally just a matter of like, time goes by, your body recuperates and uses the nutrition
yeah,
that you consume to recuperate.
yeah,
I don't know what they'd have to like demonstrate that there's some like quality exclusive to fish and eggs that is required for the recuperation process to go about fully. I'm not
right.
really sure. It's a weird claim to make, and it requires a lot of evidence. Now the ex-vegan crowd, I mean, like, they're a whole. We could talk about them for like hours. I mean, in short, though, I'm sure you know, and many people listening, many of these people have a history of like going hardcore fruitarian or raw vegan or anti supplementation and doing a lot of these like more
Yeah.
nutrient deprived versions of vegan diets. Um,
Yeah.
so there, it's a very common thing, and they end up possibly under eating. I can't like diagnose singular people. Everyone has their own like case by case thing, but to argue that there's something in plant food or in animal foods that is essential, which they were missing, that's another empirical claim, and they need to demonstrate what that is. I've never seen it demonstrated. Most things can be supplemented anyway. And then they'll sometimes say, oh, well, supplements don't always work. Okay, well, you're going to have to provide evidence for that claim as well, which
Mm.
I've never seen them do.
Well,
You know,
one thing I hear from ex-vegans who are into like lifting and stuff is that plant-based diets fucked with their digestion and stuff.
hmm
Like one example, so I was on Bobby's Perspective channel the other month. Do you know you know Bobby,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And
Unfortunately.
he mentioned that he was having to shit 16 times a day when he was quote unquote vegan. Could this
hmm
be a valid claim? Could veganism make if you're eating a massively high density of to get that calorie surplus and stuff as a vegan bodybuilder, could this be like screwing up people's guts and stuff because of all the fiber and stuff? How do you respond to that idea?
It could. I mean, I'm not an expert on like gut dysbiosis or something like that, but surely if somebody like Bobby who is eating like a raw vegan diet is having like hella fiber and really high volume as a result, intuitively it makes sense to me that yeah, you're going to have some digestive issues. You're going to be shitting all the time because the voluminous nature of your diet. But again, everyone has their own like individual thing. There's so much information I need to know before I make like an assessment. But yeah, I would say that there's many people who eat, let's say too much fiber. I have a roommate who's vegan. This is anecdotal to be clear, but whatever.
Mm,
So is Bobby, so I guess it fits the conversation. So
that's it.
he noticed he had digestive issues on a vegan diet, and I told him, why not just lower your fiber intake? And he did, and
Mm,
he was much better. There's certain plant foods that people may just have like allergic reactions to, or just don't
right.
really sit well with them. This is why people
Yeah.
on the carnivore diet, they don't, I'm not sure if they realize this, but they're going through an elimination diet. Like when you say, I'm gonna cut
Right.
out all these things, you might have consequently just cut out a singular thing that was fucking you up this whole time, and now you feel amazing.
Mm,
Right. So
yes.
that's another thing that I think they don't really think about. Uh, and then they attribute their benefits to only eating meat when it's like, actually, it's probably because you're no longer eating a specific thing that was messing you up, or at least it could be, right? I don't want to make any absolute claims here.
Well, but no, it's a very good observation. That
hmm
could well be the case. So how you mentioned there, oh, we'll just eat lower fiber foods. How on earth do we do that as vegans? Because there's fiber in every plant food. There's no fiber in animal products. Let's say I want to hit a crazy amount of calories a day because I'm bodybuilding.
hmm
And let's say this is messing up my digestive and I'm going to the toilet all the time. Like, how would I navigate that? How would I be managing to keep fiber intake down while doing that?
Yeah, so you can have plenty of things like pasta, rice, white bread, things like that. There are lower fiber plant foods. Even
Mm.
tofu isn't that crazy with fiber. When you compare it to
Okay.
things like legumes, I would avoid legumes because they're obviously crazy with fiber. But at the same time, like I wouldn't just jump to like low fiber. I would
Mm.
slowly go down and see if your symptoms slowly go down in alignment with this the progressive lowering of your fiber,
Mm.
and you may have solved the problem. I mean, these kinds of issues sometimes they're not even like dietary. Sometimes people have like infections or something like that.
Mm.
That's another thing too. Like people attribute every little physical ailment to be like, oh, it must be something I'm
Yes.
eating. When it's like, hey, maybe you have an infection or something, or maybe you have a condition. Like so you can't just
Yeah.
hone
Ex-vegans
everything
love to
on.
do this, don't
Yeah.
they? Yeah,
Hmm.
they attribute things that just naturally happen within life, just like for example with aging and stuff, and they'll just put it down to the or with work. It's
Right.
like, yeah, I went vegan for 5 years and my hair started falling out, and it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's funny, and you also get 5 years older in that time that you were vegan, and
Yeah.
oh, the other one is, I started getting tired all the time. It's like, no shit, who the fuck isn't tired in 2022? We're all
Hmm.
tired. Everyone's working shitty, stressful jobs. Everyone's caffeine dependent.
Hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
um, these are just things that can happen, right? Why do
Yeah.
people they're just looking for an excuse, right, to attribute it to veganism?
Yeah. I mean, when I was not vegan, there were days where I just felt like shit. When I'm vegan, there's of course days where I feel like shit.
Mm,
Um, it's I don't panic. I'm not like, holy shit, dude. Like, I gotta figure that. It's like, dude, just wait a couple days and you'll feel fine. Now, I'm being very general right now. You could actually have a problem or a deficiency or whatever. But yeah, these are people that are very psychologically invested in how they're feeling moment to moment, and this is like not
mm,
healthy. I mean, this way of thinking avoids the very basic realization that like you're not supposed to feel perfect all the time. You know, you're
yes,
you're a biological machine. You are navigating through this world that has to succumb to the laws of nature and biology. There's
yes.
bacteria everywhere. There's there's sicknesses. You might go to the store and hold on, like grab a handle that someone else touched that was sick, and now you might feel a little wheezy for a day, but you don't need to be like, maybe I need fish, like so
Mm,
there's many um cases like that, and I'm sure you know of someone like Tim Sheaf or Elise Parker, who I believe it was Elise that was like, I had one serving of salmon and my whole world changed. It's like, bro, this is evidence of
ah,
like placebo at work. And
yes. Or it's a grass-fed steak. It's always a salmon or a grass-fed steak. It's never
yeah,
like, yeah, dude, I ate like a fucking turkey Twizzler and my life changed or something. It's
yeah,
always the salmon or the
right,
grass-fed steak.
yeah,
Like it's this magical elixir, this magic potion or something.
uh-huh, no, exactly. The thing is, I've learned this over time, and I'm still learning this, that inferring causality is very hard to do in
Mm,
nutrition science and just in general. Uh, so the way in which people infer causality, I find, is so flawed nowadays, especially with the carnivore diet, what I mentioned earlier. Like they will lower all their processed food intake, maybe, right? In the process
yeah.
of going carnivore, and the lowering of these processed foods, the fact that they're now in a deficit and losing weight, might be why they're feeling better and why all these health markers are improving, right? But they're going to be like, oh, it's just the carnivore diet in and of itself that is doing
Mm,
this. It's like, no, you may have took out a food that was messing you up. You're possibly now eating less calories. You're not measuring for any of this. Like, people's anecdotes are so uncontrolled and unverifiable and loose.
yeah.
And the amount of people, even vegans, by the way, that do this, that just
Yes.
loosely rely on their anecdotes to be like, therefore this happened, or this caused
Mm,
this. Like, no, you don't really know that. Like, the best thing we can do is look at the totality of evidence, look at some of the best epidemiology out there with the best adjustments statistically, and also look at RCTs, like randomized controlled trials, where they have, a control group and a placebo group and an intervention group and whatever, and they try to determine, while also adjusting for all these other potential confounding factors, if the intervention is responsible for the outcome. Like that. That's how you determine causality.
yeah.
It's very complicated. The fact that people online just loosely just give out their anecdotes, it's problematic
Yeah.
because of everything I just said. Like, it's
And people,
complicated.
yeah, and people
Hmm.
lap them up. They absolutely lap these up. But
Hmm.
like, what do you think of these? Have you seen these glow ups that are now all the rage? It's like your ex-vegan glow up pages and stuff, where there'll be a picture of them on the left and they're looking this way. They're looking like a zombie or whatever. It says it's
Hmm.
vegan, and then the
Hmm.
picture of on the right and they're looking, healthy and glowing and stuff. And now
No,
I've been a carnivore for 1 year. Like, I don't know if you've come across that shit.
I,
What do you
I,
think of that?
I haven't seen that specific page, but I have seen people like that. I mean, I just have to say, the ex-vegan slash anti-vegan community nowadays, to me, they're just a giant like meme. And I'm not actually
Mm,
really worried about them because they're a very small proportion of the population. If you look at the anti-vegan like subreddit, or you look at like the comments under these anti-vegan YouTubers videos, these people are like, they're just hilarious. The way they draw conclusions, they're incredibly, like, I'm just gonna say it, like, just unintelligent. Like, and I'm not the smartest person out there. Like, I'm gonna say that right now. Like, there's many people that are much smarter than me, but like the level of reasoning I see in these anti-vegan spaces is just unbelievably
mm,
hilarious. Their lack
yeah.
of evidence for the claims they make. They're just a very toxic, weird group of people that like to overanalyze the appearance of particular people in particular angles. Uh,
Yes.
they all come across as like people in my social life that I'd rather just not have. So I'm more focused nowadays on like meat eaters. I put a
Yeah.
distinction between meat eaters and like anti-vegans and like the carnivore crowd, you know, because their movement, we can call it, is like it's somewhat based in fuck vegans, right? So
Yeah.
they're not really switchable or as switchable as say just a regular everyday meat eater. So they're a meme to me, and I feel like our energy is better spent taking meat eaters seriously and then maybe just memeing on the anti-vegans because it's just funny and like they,
Mm.
you know, they're very silly.
What do you think, though, of some of these claims that they seem to think are verifiable by science? For example, like, oh, pale skin and sunken eyes, whatever the fuck that means. I don't even know what sunken eyes means. Like, what do these things,
Yeah.
like, what do you think of those claims?
I obviously there's particular symptoms that are associated with like deficiency,
Mm.
or like being malnourished and all these things. And yeah, sometimes that I mean a lot of the times channels like vegan deterioration, whatever, they single out these like really weirdo like raw vegans that like eat nothing but like watermelon all day, um,
Yes.
that aren't supplementing, that yeah, like they look malnourished. Now, even still though, we can't make any absolute claims about them. Like we still need to run tests and we need to get blood work done. Like this is why like it can't be as simple as looking at someone through a camera. Okay.
Mm.
There's so many different reasons why somebody can look a particular way in a particular light or a particular day.
Yeah.
I there was one time where I filmed a video. I believe it was the day after like a party at my house, and I was on like 2 hours of sleep, and like I looked like complete dog shit. And any vegan deterioration fan that saw that video would just be like, "Oh my God,
I had a
Danny,
field day.
yeah,
Yeah.
Danny's dying," you know. So yeah,
But the way, yeah, like one I always get is that, oh, I'm pale and stuff. This is what they love to say to me. And it's like they obviously wouldn't say that to you because you're Middle Eastern dude, but you've never heard, oh, you're pale. But
hmm,
why the fuck wouldn't I be pale? I've lived in the UK all my life in Northern
yeah,
Europe. We get like
uh-huh,
hardly any sunlight here. Why the
yeah,
fuck wouldn't I be pale? What color do they expect me to be? It's like they'll just pick the dumbest things. And one observation I made recently is it's only ever the absolute like mouth breathers who like hate veganism and come at you with all the dumb arguments
hmm,
that pick out things about your appearance. You never hear someone who's receptive to the animal rights argument. You never hear like, yeah, that all makes sense actually, and it is oppression what we're doing to animals. Oh, you look really pale and skinny though. It's never
hmm,
like that. It's always
yeah,
just like, oh, duh, we need to eat bacon to survive, and the lions in
yeah, yeah,
the desert island. Oh, and you're skinny and pale. It's
yeah.
always from those people, right?
Yeah, these people are very, they're obviously closed from the get-go. They're toxic. Like making fun of people's appearances is like something that I try my best not to do on my channel, just because,
Mm,
you know, when you make fun of a particular person's appearance, you're indirectly making fun of anybody who looks remotely like that. And like, it's just kind of
yes,
it's
including
just,
vegans.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, because if we're starting going around saying, "Oh, well, look at you, you're fat" and stuff like that, well, there's loads of
Hmm.
fat vegans, and they're absolutely welcome in the community. We want
Right.
people of all body shapes and
Hmm.
and everything, and we want pale people.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, dude, if you look at my videos, you'll see that around wintertime, I'm always much paler, like than summertime, because actively go outside more often when it's hot out. Like,
Yeah.
And the UV rays are significantly higher at that time of the year. So I don't know, are these people going to say like, oh, Danny's vegan diet just sucks around the winter or something? I don't understand.
It wouldn't even surprise me if they did come up with that kind of shit. Tell us
Probably.
about tell us about a little meme you debunked recently that had like all the nutrients listed or something. It was like
Hmm.
veganism is deficient in this, that, and then it had just like this zombie looking guy on the right saying, show me the studies,
Right.
mocking what vegans look like. Tell us about that meme.
Yeah. So this is a meme that I've seen go around the anti-vegan community for a while, and I've also been sent it
Mm-hmm.
multiple times. And yeah, it says like vegan diets are deficient in, and then it says like carnosine, carnitine, K2, uh, B12, like all these different things, taurine,
Yeah.
and either these nutrients are either non-essential or you can actually get them from uh, plant foods. Even one of them was B6, which you can actually get to the highest degree from chickpeas over like things like chicken and beef and all these things. It was the
Yeah.
highest amount per serving compared to all these other animal products. So it's just a really stupid meme, and
Yeah.
I debunked it nutrient by nutrient. It was a very comprehensive video, probably
Yes.
one of my most research dense videos, and it was funny because like there was like anti-vegans commenting like, bro, congratulations, you just debunked a meme. It's like, no, this meme and humor in general are representative of like actual positions that people hold. And
Yes.
you know, uh, just as much as I know, and the vegans listening, that there are many vegans who or anti-vegans who believe that vegans are deficient in those nutrients. And that was the
Mm.
point of the meme. So of course I'm going to debunk it, right? Because it's a real
Yes.
position people take.
Well, do you know who was behind that meme? Because I think I do know who that was, who created that.
Yeah, I'm slowly learning that who the sarcastic Simon or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So he was vegan Vizard
Hmm.
on Instagram, and
Hmm.
he was also called that on Facebook, and then later Legendary Vegan Memes. He was called on Facebook. He was one of the top memers in the vegan community. So he is
Hmm.
an ex-vegan, quote unquote,
Hmm.
himself. And I worked with this dude at AV. We worked on the social media team together.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and what's disappointing, he wasn't just a vegan, he was an animal liberation activist. I've seen fucking pictures of the dude at Meet the Victims holding a piglet
Uh-huh.
in one of these concentration camps.
Hmm.
And now his content has gone all like anti-vegan. He's got sucked into this whole carnivore diet crowd, and the whole veganism is the new world order, and Bill Gates is trying to push this on it. So for me, he's not someone you personally knew then.
No, not really. And I would say I hope he's actually being sarcastic as is disclosing his name. Maybe that's what's
Yeah.
going on here.
Do you think there is such thing as an ex-vegan?
Yeah, I mean, it is a kind of a logical fallacy to say. It's called the no true Scotsman fallacy when people say that like, oh, you find an exception to a rule, so you say like, oh, they were never even a part of that in the first place. I believe it's possible to possess a particular set of moral values and then
Mm.
change. Now, I'm gonna probably trigger a bunch of vegans by saying that, but like the same is true of like someone can go from being uh, anti-racist to going through a bunch of terrible experiences with the let's say African Americans and then becoming a racist individual. It doesn't mean that they were anti-racist before those terrible experiences. They had the position sincerely and they've changed. People can just
It,
change their morals is how I view it.
but did they hold it sincerely? Because if that's all it took was a negative experience with a black person to then start
Hmm.
screaming the N-word at people or something, how can they have ever been an anti-racist if that's all it took?
Well, so this is going to be like a sort of a psychological empirical claim. We're going to have to like, go into someone's mind, which we are never going to have access to, or at least we don't right now. Um,
Mm,
but all I know is that it's certainly possible for somebody to hold a particular moral position and then change their moral position. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just that's just the fact of the matter. It has a nice ring to it. Like it's a good rhetoric kind of move, like a rhetorical move to say, oh, like there's no such thing as an ex-vegan. You were never truly vegan. And I used to kind of say it too until I realized like, people can technically change. I can't really deny that. I've changed many of my positions as well in the past. So yeah, unfortunately, I believe there is such thing as an ex-vegan.
Controversial, but
Yeah.
it's good to hear your insight. That's definitely interesting to know for sure.
I also think this question, not, and I don't mean this in a bad negative way to you. I think this question is very like, it's quite meaningless. Like I think we can spend time on like more, I guess, meaningful stuff. Like it's just caused so many fights in the vegan community is what I'm saying. Like people will say they were never vegan, and then someone like me starts saying what I'm saying, and then like it just starts this whole thing, and then like, oh well, you're not really vegan if you think there's such thing as an ex vegan. Like it's just like ridiculous. Like it's like, who cares? Can we just
Oh
focus
yeah,
on like what matters?
that's definitely a dick move, saying someone's not a vegan because they don't believe there's such thing as well, or they do believe there's such
Yeah,
thing as an egg. Yeah,
right.
I'm not here to do that. I just want to hear
Yeah. No,
your
totally.
view either. Yeah. But you're quite adept at the philosophy stuff as well, and sort of the kind of normative ethics and stuff about like utilitarianism and deontology and all this kind of stuff that maybe some people listening haven't come across before and stuff.
Hmm.
And you did a good video recently on crop deaths, which is
Hmm.
one of the things I think that plagues a lot of vegans, because I think carnists have come across it and they now think it's this sort of Achilles heel against veganism. So gone are now
Hmm.
the days of almost gone are the days of, in fact, no, they're nowhere near gone, but lesser now are the arguments of plants though, protein though, lions though. And
Hmm.
now the common one we're hearing online, because they really think they've got us, is crop deaths though.
Hmm.
How did you respond in that video that you made recently? Can you summarize your points that you made about why crop deaths though is a crap argument?
Yeah. So the idea is that like people say vegans are hypocrites because animals die in crop production. Now, there's an implication there that these are the same thing. Okay, whether it's a matter of quantity or even the type of killing or whatever. So it's going to
Yeah.
depend on your particular moral system. But here's one of the main differences between, say, crop deaths and deaths derived from animal agriculture for animals to become meat, right? The animals that are used in animal agriculture are bred into existence. They did not exist prior. So you know that when you buy an animal product, you are on the net creating an increase in suffering, right? You're creating
Mm,
a being who will, likely be raised in a factory farm, and even if not, you're still increasing deaths on the net as well. Now,
yes.
in the case of crop deaths, right? The animals that die in crop fields, first of all, they were not bred into existence as a result of buying plant products. They were just sitting there in the wild. And
Yes.
it's actually not clear if crop fields produce more deaths than, say, the wild. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is a very important point because if it were the case that crop fields generated an increase in utility, then yes, we can agree that buying vegan products causes death, but does it
Hmm.
cause more deaths than would have otherwise occurred? This is
Yeah.
actually like a very important question because um, if they don't, right, and they actually lower suffering or like on the net cause a net decrease in suffering, then there's actually like it's actually we could say it's a good thing to buy plant products, right? Because on the net, this is causing a decrease in suffering. Now, let me just be clear. I'm agnostic on whether or not this is the case. And I don't need to have a firm position on this to still make the vegan argument, which is against the
Hmm.
breeding, exploitation, and killing and commodification of animals. All right.
Yeah.
The breeding part is very important to cover here because um, unlike the animals that die in crop fields, the
Hmm.
animals that die in slaughterhouses were there because of your dollar. Okay.
Yes.
So that's a very big difference between the two. Um, and yeah, I mean, the video goes a little more into depth with like things like hunting as well, because technically hunting an animal
Right.
kills an
Well,
animal. Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to kind of push you on that a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, does the argument you've used there about, it's causing additional deaths to fund, like bacon and steak and blah, blah, blah. Does that
Hmm.
not play into the hunter argument or the fisherman argument about these animals are in existence anyway and they're going to die anyway? They're just going to starve or they're going to be eaten alive by another animal. By me
Hmm.
shooting them or catching them, I'm not really causing additional harm.
Yeah, so there's multiple problems, right? So first, someone might say, "Oh, I killed a deer and I lived off them for a year," which people have never really showed me the calculations for that. But let's assume that that's
It's
true.
crazy to be honest. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, you're comparing that to an instance of killing that you're not even sure causes a net increase in death anyway.
Mm,
So it actually still might even be better to pay for plants than to hunt a singular deer if paying for plants is actually reducing the amount of wild land, which causes more overall suffer, or which possesses more overall suffering. So that's point number one. Point number two, even if it were to be displayed, that killing a deer actually caused less death than the amount that you're causing on the net in crop fields. Veganism, at least in my view, is not just about suffering reduction. Okay.
hmm
It isn't the case that just because an action causes less suffering than another, that I'll always do that action. Right.
Yeah.
If this were the case, I'd have to say it's okay for me to go kill, let's say, a 400-pound bodybuilder to feed
Yeah.
off of for a year and a half, as opposed to go buy plant foods because it causes less deaths. And a
Yeah.
great philosophy, thought experiment that really emphasizes how we don't always go for the option that saves more people is the trolley problem, in which you have a train and the train is on the way to hit 5 people. You have the power to pull a lever and change the route of the train to hit one person. And a good way to think of this analogy is, let's say there's like another way to think of it, which kind of changes the way in which you'll think about what to do, is
Mm.
if you have 5 people on the way to organ failure, and you can go ahead and kill a random person, extract their organs, and save 5. Technically, doing this would result in 5 people living, but is it moral to go ahead and kill a random person if it means 5 are going to be saved, right? And
Yeah.
I don't hold that position. Now, as someone who feels that the threshold deontology captures my view most, which, if you're not aware of what that is, it's essentially the idea that past a particular threshold of utility gain, a particular action might actually become permissible. So let's say, hypothetically, just magically, I can kill one person, extract their organs, and save 1 trillion people. We're gonna just magically that's somehow possible. I'd probably be for that. Like if the ratio is like 1 to 1 trillion, for every one person you save 1 trillion. Okay, sure. But 1 to 5 is definitely not where I
Mm.
draw the line. And
And
then,
just
yeah.
before you proceed, I just want to
Hmm.
simplify for anyone listening the
Hmm.
difference between utilitarianism and deontology.
Hmm.
Utilitarianism is about kind of like for the greater good, right? Or like
Hmm.
maximizing the amount of like decreasing the overall amount of something or maximizing the overall amount of
Yeah.
something, so suffering or pleasure. Deontology is about adhering to rules and principles like rights violations. So a
Hmm.
strict deontologist, for example, would say it is not okay to like punch one person in the face to save one person from cancer or something like that, because
Hmm.
that rights violation of assaulting that person in the street is bad, so bad in itself that that would be a
Hmm.
strict deontologist, right? I'm just giving
Hmm.
an example to people listening.
Right. And I also should say this too, because I'm glad you brought up the rights violation thing. There's also, with the crop dust thing compared to animals dying in animal agriculture, there's also the nature of the killing that can actually matter to a person. So I can deem, um, defending crops or food production as not of a rights violation, whereas I can deem breeding an animal, confining them, and killing them as a rights violation. But generally, the main thing with crop deaths, just to summarize, vegans need to stop granting that crop deaths are even bad on the net to begin with, because
Mm-hmm.
that's not even clear. So, and once you do that, you don't have to be defending them. You can just ask the person to provide an argument or some empirical comparative analysis showing that actually crop deaths provide or cause more deaths than let's say the average wild field. So until somebody provides that argument, like vegans don't, like the burden of proof is going to be on the person claiming the hypocrisy, and it's
Yeah.
usually the anti-vegan or the vegan, or sorry, or the meat eater. And yeah, I would like to see one. I've been asking for one for a while, and whenever you ask for one, no one says anything because it's like they're just
Yeah.
talking out of their ass. So yeah.
Speaking of philosophy and the philosophical side of the animal rights world and stuff, what the fuck happened recently with you and Isaac? Ask yourself, the YouTuber, because he's one of the go-to philosophy people that people go towards in the vegan movement when they want to hear. He devised the excellent name the trait philosophical question, which I think is fantastic. So the question is, what is it that's true of animals that, if true of a human, would justify killing that human for a burger? So this guy, I think he's proved very valuable in that sense to the animal rights movement for his contributions and stuff philosophically. But for anyone who doesn't know, who he is and stuff, you can check him out. He's the YouTuber Ask Yourself. But yeah, you had a bit of a bad run-in with him recently, didn't you? So tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, me and Isaac have been cool and friends for like maybe a year or two now, and I even watch his content 3 to 4 years leading up to my creation of my channel. And we've even teamed up to debate an anti-vegan named Primal Edge Health before. We've been of value to each other in some form. And the thing with Isaac is that he's a very, very intelligent person. And in hindsight, after what you're about to hear happened, I view him more as maybe like a teacher than like a friend. He's somebody that I wouldn't want to be friends with, given the standard of friendship, which I learned he possesses after this altercation, right? Now, to be clear, I have a whole video on this, so I'll go over everything, but I will give a brief summary. Essentially, I was streaming one day, and Isaac, who has a history of doing this, came onto my stream. He demanded that I demod somebody who he claimed was a sophist. I said, let me look into this later, Isaac. Like, I don't, like, I'm doing something, like, whatever. Like, I'll look into this later. And
it was nothing, dude. Like, it was just, he just said, oh, there's a sophist in the comments section. Are you going to ban them or something? That's what he said.
Yeah,
right?
He said I'm modding a sophist. He didn't like that, and he told me to demod them. And I said I don't have I don't know yet that he's a sophist. I'll look into this later. We're busy watching this debate between Vegan Gains and Demon Mama, which is like another streamer. And he said, oh, and then he was spamming in my chat like for like 5 minutes straight, it seemed. Like, why is he a mod? Why is he a mod? He's spamming. And then somebody told him to stop spamming. And then he told me to ban that person as well as Lewis. And I believe what happened was, at first, Isaac told me to demod Lewis. And then I brought Isaac onto my stream, and he started talking to Lewis through the stream, like he was talking to the chat where Lewis was. And they were going to have a debate. They were about to schedule it. And then Lewis kind of said, never mind. And then he said, oh my God, okay, he's such a sophist. Danny, can you just ban him? And I was like, dude, I don't like, it's just not the way that I run my channel. Like, whatever.
Yeah, you're not just booting random people for no reason, just because someone said so in the comments section.
Right. And I've seen instances of Isaac calling people sophists who weren't being sophists. They just were very uncomfortable with the way in which he presents himself. He was being a dick. He was insulting them, like whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Isaac can understand that that's a reason why somebody wouldn't want to have a conversation.
Yes.
So with this in mind, I'm like, listen, I'll check this out later and I'll verify it. And then the person, that there's someone that donated that told me that Isaac had banned him because, to be clear, Isaac was a mod on my in my stream chat. So he had banned this person for, quote, talking shit about him. And they left the donation. He told me to like fully ban them because he just muted them. So they came back. He told me to fully ban them. I said, what did he say? And like, I couldn't see what he said because Isaac had muted his messages. So I was like, I have no evidence to work with here. Like, whatever. And then he said, listen, Danny, are you going to ban them or not? I said, at the moment, no. And then he said, okay, well, fuck off. You're a piece of shit. Never speak to me ever again. And he just left. And then,
Yeah. And this was
yeah.
live in the middle of your
Oh
fucking
yeah.
stream, like that had
Oh
nothing to
yeah.
do with him. You were just trying to have like a stream with someone else, and he just turned up and acted like a controlling dick, to be honest. Like, and it's
Yeah.
shocking how he discarded you as a friend like that. How he just
Hmm.
like he even told you, I don't want anything to do with you ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then he just left.
Hmm.
And then you did a little follow-up vid, kind of like trolling him a little bit, didn't you? With the
Drumming.
you took some
Yeah.
clips of him,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It was
Which is
super
that
fun.
was yeah. But you know, the funny thing is, and then you know, further to that, you know, his behavior towards David Rams as well was totally unacceptable.
Hmm.
So Avi was trying to get trying to provoke David Rams into a discussion about killing predators and blah blah blah. And Isaac was calling David Rams scum and a sophist and blah blah blah, just because David Rams couldn't be asked to have
Hmm.
what he saw as an ultimately fruitless and pointless conversation that had,
Hmm.
in David's world, no real world consequences.
Hmm.
And his behavior towards David as well, I just thought was ridiculous. And you know, I messaged Isaac about this afterwards and told him that his behavior was just sheer lunacy.
Hmm.
Um, and that he was, you know, and what was did you highlight that he'd made comments as well about like he would kill sophists if all consequences could be removed, he would kill sophists or something? Isaac said this.
Yeah. I was sent some screenshots of this. I thought they were jokes, but they seem very much in context. And I've seen multiple accounts of him saying this, but he essentially is of the belief that in principle, if we had a machine that can like detect sophistry, like error free, that he'd be okay with painlessly murdering these people.
I mean, and one of yeah, so he just sounds
Hmm.
like a fucking incel school shooter. Like clearly that's an unhinged position to have.
Yes.
And he
It's it's
kind of
it's it's a little odd. The
Mm,
fact that people do that is like a justification for painlessly executing them. It's like, bro, like people are human. Like sometimes people are just a little dishonest in their arguments, or they
mm.
don't want to admit they're wrong. So what? We should just kill them. You know, like that. Like that's insane.
But you know, the other thing about this thing with Isaac is he always complains about people dodging stuff. He's like, "Oh, you're
Hmm.
dodging and you fleed like a coward and blah blah blah," just because people won't entertain his stuff.
Hmm.
He has not acknowledged any of this criticism for his disgraceful behavior towards you or David Rams. So like he
Yeah.
just blocks me straight away. He hasn't responded to your vids. So Isaac, why aren't you acknowledging this? Why are you just fleeing like a coward when your behavior has been called out?
Well, I'll be honest. I think I know Isaac very well, and I think I know why he's not responding. And I've seen screenshots of him reacting to my video. He only really cares for a point out of a logical error he's made. So anything like interpersonal or based on like friendship or like something like, hey man, like maybe your standard of friendship is a little fucking weird. That is meaningless to him. Unless I could say
Yeah.
like, hey Isaac, you contradicted yourself here logically. He's not
His
going to pay
life is a
attention.
fucking debate. His life is a Discord debate.
Yeah, and I mean, I have evidence of him actually contradicting himself in a video, and I've thought about like making that video just to get his attention as for memes to be like, oh, like you don't care about anything I have to say about this friendship stuff, so maybe I can get your attention with this.
Mm,
Ask yourself contradicts himself. He'll click that video like right away. Um,
yeah.
but I'm at a point where I'm kind of over it. You know, I would have probably went even more in on this if you had done this interview a week after. But for anyone
Yeah.
listening, I do recommend my video covering it. I think it's called like "Ask Yourself Calls Me a Piece of Shit" or something. Uh,
And
super fun.
And just finally, because we're coming towards the end of the show now. Now, I don't want to get into the argument of this whole killing predators thing that happened between, you know, it was Avi speaking to David Rams and then Isaac
Hmm.
acting like a total dick, whatever. But do you think it is a discussion worth having? Or like David Rams, do you just think that it's a pointless waste of time kind of to even discuss this? I'm not asking your opinion on whether we should kill
Yeah,
predators. I'm
right.
just asking, do you think it's a discussion worth having?
I mean, I like worth having is kind of a, you know, that's going to come down to my like preferences as a person.
Hmm.
I enjoy philosophical conversations. I think they're just on that ground alone, like I would say it's worth having. Now,
Yeah.
whether it's worth having right now, given how much work we have to do, it doesn't seem like that. Like, given especially the emotional reactions that people have when hearing the topic, it seems like a divisive topic. Um, I think a lot of people aren't prepared to actually fully engage with it. So, on the grounds alone of like, oh, I like philosophy, I think it's worth having. But with
Yeah.
respect to the vegan movement, I mean, maybe in private or something, but
Yeah, I
and
think it's a
it's
like to use a very British analogy. I think it's one of those conversations it's maybe cool to have down the pub over a few pints or something. But
right.
I don't think it's really something like I don't think someone's a scumbag for not entertaining the argument or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean to be clear, like David has entertained the argument with me multiple times. He doesn't. The main reason he was uncomfortable there was because of the ambushing nature of what happened. Like, um,
Yeah,
people, and that comes back to what I said before about how I don't know if Isaac is like psychologically aware or socially aware, or he just doesn't care about the fact that somebody can just feel so uncomfortable in a situation that they'd rather just leave it. Like, and
yeah,
they're
he's
not dodging because they're like scared or they're
yes,
being a sophist. They're just literally like, wow,
exactly.
I'm uncomfortable right now. I don't
Yeah.
want to be here. Like, you know.
Yes, yes. He's very intelligent logically, but he's socially inept. And he didn't understand that being in a Discord server full of a load of weird, sweaty incels, like, ganging up on you, like, who the fuck wants to be there? Why would anyone,
Yeah.
whether you had a good argument or not, want to be in there discussing that? Anyway, Danny, thanks so much for coming on to the show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And yeah, it was a pleasure to have you on, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.